Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, December 21st, 2020, and today we're going to be taking a look at the early voting statistics from the state of Georgia with its runoff Senate elections that will determine the Senate balance of power. If we characterize all of the states that were won by the Republican Party, you would need to actually give them one state that was won by the one Senate seat in the state of Georgia in order for them to reach an outright majority. The reason for that is because Donald Trump was not reelected the next president of the United States, which means that they do not need just 50 seats. They, in fact, need 51. Georgia prohibits both parties from reaching their Senate majority. The Republican Party starts out with an early advantage, only needing one out of the two Senate seats, but both of them are held on the same day, and we probably won't see too many split-ticket voters. But for the early voting numbers, what do we actually see? Well, in terms of total early votes, we see 1.47 million voters already voted ahead of the 2020 election, and that's as of today, December 21st, 2020. We have 15 days to go. There's still a pretty significant period of time for people to vote early, but if we're looking back at the general election, we did see 4 million early votes. It was last updated on the 5th of November, so they counted all of the ballots. 4 million votes were cast early in the state of Georgia. They saw roughly an additional 1 million voters in person on Election Day. So when you're looking at the Georgia early voting numbers, you may think, well, 1.47% is nowhere near 4 million, but still, there's a pretty significant period of time yet to go, and also, it's a runoff election. It's pretty much an election that is going to have very little impact directly on the state of Georgia, more so on the national level, and it's right after a very long and grueling campaign season that many Americans were very happy to just get over and move along with their lives. Not many people are going to be as enthusiastic about an election that just has two Senate positions compared to an election that has the presidential ballot on it. But we are still seeing high turnout numbers that I think the Democratic Party should be fairly happy with. Now, there are some certain demographic groups where I would say the Democratic Party should be worried. If they didn't look at the race breakdown, I would say the Democratic Party might actually be in the negative based off early voting. However, when I'm taking a look at the percent by demographic group, I think the Democratic Party should be cautiously optimistic moving forward into these Senate elections. I don't think that they are the absolute favorites to win these Senate elections, but I would absolutely not count out either of the Democrats. Both of them have a very realistic shot at winning, and it'd be stupid to say that this is not going to be a winnable race straight off the bat. It's winnable. It can be done. But also the Republican Party, like I mentioned, starts out with the advantage, has maintained that advantage. I personally believe the Republican Party is going to win both Senate seats, but that's not to say the Democratic Party can't do it. But my gut feeling has been the same. Based off all of the data that I've seen, I think the Democratic Party will have a very good showing, especially in a state such as Georgia, when they typically don't do well on statewide races. But also, I think the Republican Party still starts out with the advantage. But let's go ahead and take a look at these early voting numbers. So as of today, 19% of registered voters in the entire state have actually voted. That's surprisingly high for a runoff election. If the Senate majority had already been done with, we probably wouldn't see as much energy on the Democratic side. The Democratic Party desperately needs both Senate seats. They don't just need one like the Republican Party does. They need both Senate seats because without it, sorry about that. Without it, they will not win the Senate majority, period. If you're looking at the state of Georgia, it is so crucial for the Democratic Party, a state that was won by 12,000 votes out of 5 million cast in the 2020 election. So when you see this number, 1.47 million people voting, the Democratic Party needs to actually take a closer look at the demographic breakdown. They actually have divided it up into early votes in person and mail-in ballots. So based off the mail-in ballots, 43% of those have been requested have been returned. 500,000 votes have been cast already by mail. And when you're looking at the mail ballots accepted by race and ethnicity, well, it's better for the Democratic Party than the early voting numbers were in terms of mail ballots returned and accepted for the 2020 election. I really need to clear my throat. I apologize for that, but nothing I can do mid-video. But overall, based off these numbers, if we compare them right next to each other, you will see that white voters go from 53% on the 2020 election to 56% in the Senate election, which isn't always the best thing, but when you're looking at the counties where we see a lot of these mail-in ballots, I'd say the Democratic Party should be, as I said in the beginning of the video, cautiously optimistic. In terms of the non-Hispanic black population, the numbers go from 30.3% in the general election to 31.3%. So that's also something that I think that the Democratic Party should be happy with as well. It's an increase. I don't think they should be super happy with the white vote share going up. This also largely has to do with the fact that the age groups are going up pretty significantly, meaning older voters are voting at a higher rate than younger voters compared to the 2020 election. But I think this black vote that's going up for the Democratic Party, not necessarily for the Democratic Party, but in terms of mail ballots returned and accepted, I think that is a very good sign for the Democrats moving forward. White voters have shown us that they do lean to the right. Absolutely, in the state of Georgia, they lean to the right. However, I also do think that given the state of Georgia's demographic groups in terms of suburban voters, the Democratic Party should be cautiously optimistic about how these white voters are voting, because in the 2020 election, they pretty much pushed away Donald Trump while accepting a number of other statewide Republicans. They could be doing the same thing now, but these Republicans have also tackled themselves on to Donald Trump. And also, it doesn't hurt that minority numbers are up. But this is just the mail ballots accepted. In terms of in-person early votes, we can actually go ahead and compare them from the 2020 election. And you will see that in-person early votes actually favored the Republican Party more, because we saw a higher percent of white voters vote. 1.5 million white voters voted in the early vote, 58%, and only 26% of them were black voters. Well, in the runoff election, we actually see it decrease for the white voters, and also an increase for black voters. So in-person early votes, 901,000, so a lot lower, but also 15 days to go. Very, very contentious Senate elections, but 53.8% compared to 58%. In-person votes are going to favor the Democratic Party more than they did in the 2020 election. Just 26% of the in-person vote in the state of Georgia, early vote, 26% black. This election, 33%. So I'd actually say that these numbers, especially with the in-person early votes, favor the Democratic Party more so than the increase in terms of the black vote in mail-in ballots. The only thing that I would say is an overall negative is the age difference. The age difference in terms of total early votes versus total early votes in the 2020 election. So based off the total early voting, we actually have the breakdown here. So they combine the two. 56.5% of voters who voted early, combined with mail-in ballots, combined with early in person, 56.5% were white. Well, in this election, what we've seen so far, where we've seen 30% of 2020 turnout, only 54.4% of these voters have been white. And in terms of black voters, it's gone up to 32%. Now, keep in mind, only 1.5 million people have voted early. So there's still a lot to go. However, 32% up from just 27.7% is a good sign for the Democratic Party. 54% down from 56.5% is good for the Democratic Party. Now, the Hispanic vote share has decreased based off the early vote. Non-Hispanic Asian American has decreased as well. Non-Hispanic Native American has stayed the same. And in terms of the other vote, 10.5% down to 8.4%. So what we've actually seen is that, other demographic groups have gone down at the expense of black voters increasing in terms of their percent. That's where the rest of the percentages have gone. So we've actually seen a very large amount of black voters in the state of Georgia, which traditionally, historically, vote for the Democratic Party at very high rates, as white voters do for the Republican Party, but the numbers are down for white voters, which in turn I would say is a beneficial thing for the Democratic Party moving through the early vote, because if it's looking better than 2020, and if they won in 2020, you can start to draw the conclusion that the Democratic Party actually has a chance in these two runoff elections. However, there's one caveat. The age numbers don't necessarily add up with the respective party vote share that we would expect based off plain demographic numbers. 18 to 24-year-olds, 8% of the early vote was done by 18 to 24-year-olds in the 2020 election, general election. 12.6% was 25 to 34-year-olds, and 14.4% was 35 to 44-year-olds. 18% was 45 to 55-year-olds, but looking at the total early votes by age in this election, well, it goes down amongst 18 to 24-year-olds. I just said from 8% down to 4.8%. In terms of voters that are 25 to 34, goes from a whopping 13 points down to 7.5. 35 to 44, also a decrease from 14 points down to 10.3. And in terms of voters from 45 to 55, well, it goes down from 18 points down to just 15.4. The only groups that we've actually seen an increase are older voters. which actually vote for the Republican Party at higher rates, unless they are older minority voters. Older minority voters are more center-wing type Democrats. When you're looking at it, when they do vote for the Democratic Party, they aren't exactly as far to the left as young voters. They aren't exactly as, I guess you could say, progressive as voters that are in a younger demographic group for a variety of reasons. But when you're looking at the older demographic group, immediately you might think that this doesn't necessarily benefit the Democratic Party. And it wouldn't if you didn't see the racial breakdown. But based off the racial breakdown, we could actually see older minority voters voting at a higher rate. And also, we could be seeing the fact that younger voters may be inclined to vote in person in the runoff election. Or also, we could be seeing the fact that only those who are disproportionately affected by COVID-19 using the vote by mail option at higher rates. That's very possible as well. If you're 18 years old and you pose a much lower risk to COVID-19, even exposure or just the symptoms of it, compared to someone who may be 66 and up with a pre-existing condition, they would be more likely to vote by mail than you. And you may have voted by mail in the general election, but you might not see a problem with voting in person in the runoff election. So there are a number of reasons as to why the mail-in ballots could be skewed by age, but demographic groups typically don't lie. And the fact that we've seen an increase for black voters, which are the most solid Democratic voting base in the entire country, specifically black women, compared to white voters going down from the 2020 general election, when the general election was a time when the Democratic Party won Georgia. I think the Democrats should go into the Senate elections cautiously optimistic. It is a race worth fighting for, and with 30% of the 2020 turnout already in, the numbers are starting to benefit the Democratic Party. The numbers are benefiting the Democratic Party as we see them now. Not to say that will hold. There are still 15 days to go. Anything is possible, but it's not out of the question. And no, the numbers are not telling us that the Republican Party is absolutely going to take away this election. They're not absolutely going to win it outright, as you might expect in a traditional runoff election. Right after a president is defeated, you may think Democrats have become complacent, but the Democratic Party is fighting for both of these Senate seats, and we could be surprised with what we see on Election Day. Both parties have a very good chance at winning. I'm still going to stand by my statement that the Republican Party has the advantage as we get through Election Day, because I expect these numbers to go down. But if they don't, it's going to get a lot harder for the GOP to win, which sounds very weird to say. I still think the GOP is favored to win, like I said, but if these numbers hold, if we see, it matching 50% turnout, 60% turnout compared to the 2016 election, and the black vote is up 5 points as it was, that is something to note. That is very, very important to note, because that could completely rewrite how we look at the election, completely rewrite what we look at the polling data, where they could be missampling the amount of voters that have voted. So it really all depends on what we see through the continued days. We could see a Biden victory, or a Democratic victory. We could see a Republican victory. We have 15 days to go, but right now I'd say the numbers benefit the Democratic Party. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my post-2020 election videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.